What's poppin', people? It's Dante. Thinking is for idiots. Stop thinking. Just shoot. You know, I think that we need to stop thinking. Start feeling from the heart. You know, go full force with thumos, with vitality, with spiritedness, with your practice and your everyday life. So the idea is very simple. You know, this world can become a prison if you're trapped in your mind. But what if I were to say that you had the key to unlock yourself from the chains that is bogging you down? You know, when you're caught up in thought and you're in your mind, you know, that's hell on earth. But paradise is found from within, from remembering that you're a child, taking the key and unlocking the door to your heart. And then when you're open and you're receptive and you're feeling and you're moving your body through the world and you're photographing, you exist outside the passage of time. You know, we have a past, we have a future, but these things aren't of our concern. You know, our concern is being grateful for the present, for that is the ultimate gift of life. And so here we are on this beautiful day in Tokyo. It's my last day. Day 13, baby. Got the GoPro Mini rolling with the super view, 1080p, 30 FPS, and I'm gonna do my best to just remain in that perpetual flow state throughout the entirety of this last and final day. So this is my last full day of shooting in the streets of Tokyo. And so I will be returning home tomorrow. And so I decided actually today, I'm gonna throw a Hail Mary and I'm gonna check out one of those really cool bookstores that they have here in Tokyo. I think it's called Komiyama Bookstore somewhere. I'll have to take the train or something maybe. And yeah, hopefully go and find something rare. I saw online they have this like ultra rare Daido Moriyama like photo book. Oh, excuse me. Photo book that looks really cool. It's like photos he made of some sort of like wrestler, and apparently it's one of 50 copies, and I think that's pretty cool. There's also some book by Shomei Tomatsu that I'm curious about. And so I'm putting the Ricoh GF2 flash on top of my Ricoh GR3 and gonna walk through this grungy alleyway here in Tokyo and photograph the grit and grime of Shinjuku as I talk to you. Yeah, I like looking at all the textures and things on the walls. Actually, last night I was walking through these alleyways just in the middle of the night and the police came and stopped me. And I had to leave the alleyway. I mean, I could have probably stayed, but I was just like, oh, should I leave? I showed him my LCD screen and like showed him what I was photographing, and it was just kind of funny. It's like, what is this American guy doing back here photographing? So I'm thinking today also about change and what it means to change. You know, I think to change is happiness. You know, I think to change is joy. You know, to change to me is bliss. That sort of period of transformation, of undergoing metamorphosis, evolution, right? This to me is like a peak human experience of flourishing. And so I've been changing a lot on this trip. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, I've been shooting in black and white for the past 3 years, which is a really huge change for me. But even just throwing the flash on my camera and photographing in this new way, using this new technique and tool, using dual-wielded cameras. I've got the Ricoh GR3X on the neck. I've got the Ricoh GR3 with a flash on the wrist, right? So I have like 2 camera system. I'm using the 40mm, I'm using the crop mode with the 71mm, and I'm really pushing myself to experiment on this trip. I'm really pushing myself to push the limits within myself. And so I think it's important to not remain stagnant, but to be in a state of motivation, right? Motivation is simple. It's not something external that's pushing you, but it derives internally through your legs, moving through the world. And so motivation, movere, meaning to move, it's very simple. You just have to start moving. You have to stop thinking, right? You got to follow your heart, follow your joy. And I think that with transformation and change comes happiness. And I think that ultimately we all seek that, right? I mean, I could never remain the same for the rest of my life. I could never create the same photographs every single day for eternity, using the same techniques, using the same workflow, using the same philosophy and applying that endlessly. But what I remind myself as I photograph throughout my life now is that you cannot make the same photograph twice, right? I think I hit a wall previously shooting in color, that I'm breaking through and I'm busting through the glass ceiling with this new process, shooting in high contrast black and white. And I'm recognizing that returning to light, returning to shadow, returning to the essence of the medium, photography, phos meaning light, graphe meaning writing or drawing, using light as my guiding star, using light as my ultimate subject and medium, and simply following the light and using light as a way for me to etch, shape, and form into people, places, surfaces, and everything in between, is unlocking endless possibility in photography. For the way the light casts upon the world will never be the same, and is always in movement, is always in flux, and is always changing. And so I want to be like the light, always moving, changing, and observing life through the way in which I interpret light is really having me just like flourish as an artist. And so yeah, light is my primary interest, if you're curious. As much as I love humanity, being out in embodied reality, engaging with the world on the front lines of life, you know, being out here, I'm, you know, observing all of this sort of beautiful sights, engaging with the people, looking at the buildings, feeling the ground beneath my feet, walking with barefoot shoes, you know, going for a slow cruise, enjoying the sounds, the smells, you know, I'm in this sort of physical embodied reality, enjoying all these simple sensations. You know, we have our five senses, but I think that through photography we can transcend the material plane through the creation of art. And so the goal is not necessarily for me going forward to simply photograph what life is and to photograph reality, but it's to transcend this world, to go beyond photography and to go beyond reality through the abstraction of the pictures that I make through the medium of photography. And I think that, to me, is the most beautiful way to approach this thing, is through not necessarily using the world as, you know, this like place for me to document fact, but using the world as the canvas for me to reflect the internal state of me. And so the photographs I make become a subjective interpretation of reality. And I'm not necessarily looking to describe a fact. I'm not necessarily looking to describe, you know, when I put four corners around something, that this is true, but I'm trying to evoke how I feel through the medium of photography. And I think this, to me, is the most powerful place to be as a photographer, because what happens is, with thought, you know, I started this video off talking about thought and thinking. You know, when you're trapped in thought, when you're trapped with preconceived notions and preconceptions of what you will find, what photography is and how you should be, or what kind of pictures you're trying to make, it limits you. You put yourself within that box, but you have to take the key and unlock the box and create a new reality, create a new world through the medium of photography. And so that's where I want to be, is to sort of just exploring and tinkering endlessly. And there's been numerous occasions on this trip where I've had these breakthroughs in my creative practice that is pushing the limits, that is pushing me to try new things. And then through that transformation and change, I'm finding joy and meaning in the process. I'm finding joy and meaning in the mundane nature of everyday life. You know, one of the thoughts I have is this concept of the eternal loop, and, you know, waking up each day on repeat, you know, where you wake up, you do the same thing over and over again, you have your routine, you get on the bus, you go to work. But with a camera in hand, photography becomes a superpower, you know, where I wield this camera as a sword, striking through the heart of chaos, reflecting the soul of the street, creating visual and order and harmony through the spontaneity of everyday life. It's so funny quoting that idea I have, because when I consider the goal of the photographer, it's simple. It's to embrace the unknown, to put order to the chaos, right? To articulate things and to sort of put order in your frames. But what's interesting about the approach I have going forward is sort of letting go, letting the chips fall as they may. And as much as I ride that fine line between order and chaos, light and shadow, when I'm photographing life, I'm not photographing what it is, but what it could be. And so through the act of making a picture, I'm simply curious about what reality will manifest to be through what the camera sees. And so by boosting my contrast in the camera to the maximum, using a small JPEG file with the contrast, the grit, and the grain cranked to the maximum, I'm allowing this sort of removal of control in the process. I'm using a small compact digital camera with an LCD screen, and I'm photographing very loosely and not necessarily intentionally composing things, right? And so on the technical, practical level with this new process, what I'm doing is liberating myself creatively by removing too much of the control that I've used to have using a viewfinder camera. And so with this new process, I'm on the technical, fundamental, practical, physical level of the way in which I'm photographing, allowing spontaneity to sort of override and allow that sort of inner child and that curious state of being guide the things that I shoot and how I photograph. And so I think that removal of control, I think that sort of embrace of the imperfect nature of life, of spontaneity, is to me the most beautiful way to approach street photography that I've recently adopted using this new process of shooting this way. And so, yeah, I say, let the chips fall as they may, embrace the spirit of play, and stop taking you as a person and your photography so seriously. Where there's this notion I think about with photography where you put your photography hat on, you wipe the lens down and put the camera on your neck, and you're going out there to tell some visual stories. And through that lens of trying to say something, you really wind up saying nothing at the end of the day. I think if you have your, your why, you can bear almost anyhow. Like if you're out in the world and you know why you're doing the thing that you're doing, if you find meaning in the process of what you're doing, I don't think it's necessary for you to contrive a narrative. I don't think it's necessary for you to sort of like force, your vision upon the world. But I think to go slow, to let life flow towards you, and then you're there prepared with your camera ready to click the shutter, is to me the most liberating approach to photography, because I use photography, and the reason why I photograph is simply to affirm life, to say yes to life, and show gratitude for life generally. I think it's a very simple way of approaching photography. I'm not trying to say anything, but what I have to say will reflect in the photographs I make. I'm no longer approaching the streets as a documentary photographer looking to describe life as it is, once again, but photographing what it could be through abstraction of reality. I'm much more interested in photography being done in this vein. And so I'm just sharing my thoughts out loud as I go through the world, exploring in Tokyo, enjoying the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feeling of the streets of Tokyo, as I will deeply, deeply miss this place. And I typically don't feel this way about locations that I visit. I think that Tokyo is special in my heart. I think that there will forever be a pre-Tokyo Dante and a post-Tokyo Dante. Frankly, I think that this trip has changed me, and I think that it was fun to share the journey, share my thoughts, share my photos, and the sort of stream of becoming. I don't like to hold things back. I don't like to make things perfect. I don't like to just share and sort of like curate the feed. I don't like that approach to photography, but I like to show everything in a stream. I like to share the entirety of the process and share how I change and evolve through each click of the shutter. I think that my goal is authenticity, the sort of authentic expression to flow through me as I speak, as I write, as I photograph, as I go about my everyday life. And so I simply don't hold back, and I don't think that you should either. I think that you should let your freak flag fly, kind of remind yourself that you will and must die, and then from that remembrance of your sort of flesh nature, where you cut, you bleed, you feel sorrow, pain, and greed, you lust for the flesh of others, and you are imperfect in your design, yet despite that fact, you strive for the divine. Well, guess what? Maybe you can't live forever, but at least you can make a photograph. And so as you photograph on the streets, reflect your soul in the shit you make. Detach from the outcome and the notion of making anything good or bad. For we're demigods, baby. We'll live on forever through the photographs we make. Our souls are immortal. So immortalize yourself through photography. How about that? Immortalize yourself through the medium. Allow your soul to live on forever through the photographs you make. You might not live forever, but at least you can make a photograph. And that fact, that idea, truly, truly keeps me going, keeps me pushing, keeps me clicking the shutter, keeps me affirming life, keeps me saying yes to life, affirming my everyday mundane existence of being this flesh thing in embodied reality, walking through the world with my imperfections and flaws. But despite that fact, I strive to touch the sky, to transcend the material world through honoring the divine, the inner child within me that wants to remove the box, remove the prison from my mind, and start to just feel from the heart, and sort of return to the playground, return to play, return to childlike curiosity in that innocent state. And so through returning to that sort of submission to my inner child, I find God by following the light. Yes, sir. That's a wrap. That's Tokyo. Now let's go to the Komiyama bookstore, pick up this expensive 55,000 yen Daido Moriyama 1 of 50 edition print copy and see if they have it in stock. Let's go.